The day has hardly begun, and last night I had water dripping uh, into my office, and I couldn't work out from where. So I was up incredibly late. I still can't work out where the water came from, if indeed it came from outside. Maybe there's some silent leakage from somewhere else. Anyway, it's all gone this morning, and I thought I would respond very early on to some of the comments. Um, so there's a comment by Mark Dyer, and it's with respect to the idea that I question whether or not Brexit was the will of the people, and Brexit was certainly the will of the majority, and I've always said I'm happy to go along with that. I think we should have dealt with it in a decisive way instead of pussyfooting around. Theresa May chose the worst option of all with Brexit, which was to piddle and do very little and hope to hide the reality in a choice selection of ambiguous words. Well, the point is we need to get away from this approach to diplomacy and this approach to language. We should we should bite the bullet, grip the nettle, and use language in a coherent and meaningful and unambiguous way. And I think that would be my recommendation, incidentally, to Chris Heaton Harris as well, with his negotiations about Northern Ireland. Unambiguous language that means the same wherever you are and whoever you are, because in the end, ordinary people have to unpick this absurd phrasing to still get to some sort of truth. And as I say, I think the Brexit installation was fudged. It was also incredibly badly managed by Lord Frost. And so Mark Dyer says, my Ramona credentials are on full display here, even when discussing voluntary euthanasia. Yes, it's true, because Esther Ranson appeals to what the country wants, what the country needs, what the country desires. Well, we can't know that, and even if there is one person in the country who resists something, then that is not what the country wants. And this idea that a cheap majority is what the country wants is to deify our very limited understanding of democracy and a vote in a way that isn't sustainable. What the country wants is not necessarily what it gets. And having taken a decision in a democratic system, we should then follow it through with as much thought for those people who voted for the action as for those people who voted against it. And we should try to take a statesmanlike approach, which is not what Theresa May did, which is not what Boris Johnson did. They took a partisan approach. Theresa May was on one side of the argument, Boris Johnson on the other, and they were both sort of playing around with words, and neither of them were looking at the reality. So therefore things like the Dublin III Protocol were ignored, and the Northern Ireland Agreement was ignored, and we are still paying the price in terms of a lack of an effective administration installment, and a deluge of small boats risking people's lives coming across the channel because we have no access to the policing arrangements, that the international policing arrangements and the international information that we had access to before, as well as the concepts of returning people under the Dublin III Protocol. So I continue with what Mark says. Brexit was indeed what Brexit was indeed that for which the majority voted, but for the first time were ignored. And, far from making their globalist club more attractive to Britons, our European friends, good sarcastic Johnsonite descriptor, are making everything as awkward as they can for us. With regard to Esther Ranson, her plight makes me pleased that I have insulin-dependent diabetes. My problem is that I love my partner, enjoy the company of him and our friends far too much to want to leave them presently. Of course, if Islam ever becomes the government of this country, we'll both be judicially murdered anyway, probably in as nasty and torturous a way as the imams can devise. I disagree with that. I think the idea that Islam is hostile to homosexuality is a cultural misreading of Islam, and I happen to know of two gay-friendly mosques, one in France and one in South Africa, as indeed I know of gay-friendly synagogues and gay-friendly churches, and indeed the Pope is leading some of that debate at the moment, and there's a serious pushback from Ghana and from other countries that are trying very hard to prove their value. Often people try to prove their value by overstating a position, and as ever, the majority of bishops in the Catholic Church have flirted with a homosexual lifestyle at some point in their career. And so this is a subject I think the lady doth protest too much. But Mark, thank you very much. And it's always good to have my Ramona credentials identified. I don't think I am a Ramona. I think I'm a realist instead. But I certainly would never deny the fact that I voted to remain. I did everything I could to try to avoid the remaining position. Now there was another story that I wanted to pick up, and I'm just looking for it now, and I can't even remember what the subject was. An act of contrition is all that is open to her. I think that's Baroness Moan. That's it. There we are. Ian Gascoigne says Tim's morphing into Will from The Inbetweeners. Well, I'm not sure I am particularly, and I'm going to have a chat with... The Inbetweeners was such an odd television programme, because I taught one of the writers of The Inbetweeners and one of the producers of The Inbetweeners. So I was always a little bit anxious once I realised this connection was so intimate. I was always a little anxious that I was going to turn up as a character, or indeed that the teaching characters who were splattered around the programme might have something in common with me. And I also think I gave Ian his first job in a production of Hamlet, and he was very good. He is very good. He's a very fine writer, Ian Morris. So I've watched The Inbetweeners very carefully, and I don't think I am like Will, and I'm not quite sure what you mean. And this is with respect to Baroness Moan's fight back, and her claim that Rishi and many people in the government knew exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. And I'm not sure that that is the case, and B, I'm not sure it's a defence anyway. Well, you all knew is not a defence. The fact that everybody knew doesn't diminish the fact that you've done something wrong, and there are absolute ethical positions. But Ian Gascoigne, I am charmed that you that you should associate me with such a wonderful, such a brilliantly made program, and such brilliantly made films, and I salute the writing ability and the production and the concept of the In-Betweeners, but I really don't think that I am up to comparison even with one of the characters. So thank you for the idea and the uplift on a Tuesday morning. But I think you're gifting me with something which isn't entirely there.